thank you all so much for coming out. We do appreciate it. This is a little bit of a roundtable kind of discussion about what happened during the legislative session in Texas. Of course, there's still some more to go. We've got special sessions in the fall. We've got, of course, next month, the impeachment trial of Attorney General Ken Paxton. We'll talk about that later. But first off, quick introduction. I'm Brandon Waltens. I'm the managing editor of Texas Scorecard. Here we have Chris Salcedo, radio, Newsmax, and of course the host of the Salcedo Storm podcast on TexasScorecard.com as well. Right. And then you know him, you love him, the publisher of Texas Scorecard, Michael Quinn Sullivan here as well. I want to start off, we'll go over some of the big issues, the big stories that happened during the legislative session in Austin. But I do want folks to know that are here watching now that you can, if you've got any questions, we're going to have some time for Q&A after we're done talking. And so be thinking of those. We'd love to answer as many questions as possible. But my first question to sort of start off with both of y'all is, before this session, we had, of course, the elections in 2022. And as we've seen now for going on decades, Republicans again elected to control the Texas House, the Texas Senate, every statewide elected position in Texas. So again, Republicans dominate. What were your expectations heading into the legislative session when it began in January?
To me?
Sure.
Okay. I was expecting to get some conservative priorities that we've been long waiting for, finally done. I think with what was going on in Washington, the people of Texas sent a clear message: we want no part of that. Right. So we went with the alleged conservative party and said we expect our priorities to get addressed. Half the legislature took us seriously. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Yeah, I've tried to back off of my soft drink consumption. Okay, and this is going somewhere. Which Chris's look on his face is, what? Are we were we having the same conversation? I love Dr. Pepper. I now allow myself 2 Dr. Peppers a week, and that I know it's Dr. Pepper because of the can. Right, the can tells me it's Dr. Pepper. It's the maroon can. It's got the logo, no period after the DR. And so when I pop it open, but it tastes like Pepsi, I'm probably going to hurt someone, right? Because the can promised that it's Dr. Pepper. And I feel like that as voters, we keep voting in primaries and in general elections for Dr. Pepper, but yet come the legislative sessions, they are spraying us down with Pepsi, and it's like the diet Pepsi, which is even worse, and yet for some reason we keep saying, oh yeah, give me more, and mixing metaphors now. I feel like that we are often like Charlie Brown in the Peanuts cartoons, where we keep letting Lucy promise that this time she won't pull the football from us, and yet every time we keep falling for it. And it just, it feels like this, this legislative session, we went into it being told there's a $32 billion budget surplus.
Right.
$32 billion of money over-collected from the citizenry. In a moral world, that $32 billion would have been not even a single question. It would have been shoved back to the taxpayers. And yet, we were all giddy because the governor said, well, we'll give you a half back. Oh, yay! When the homeschool kid at Chick-fil-A only gives me half of my change back, I get angry. But I applaud when it's the governor. We need to change our expectations because we keep allowing ourselves to lower our expectations.
I think we need to change our mindset.
Yeah.
Because for the longest time, I don't know if you guys have seen this. There's a guy that makes all kinds of really impactful paintings. I think McNaughton is his name. And there's a picture of all the past former Republican presidents playing poker.
Yeah.
Have you seen this one?
Yeah, of course.
They're all sitting around the table. You got Lincoln, you got Reagan there holding court. And I keep that in my studio when I'm doing radio or television, and I always keep it in view because I'm reminded of how silly and stupid I was to believe that there's actually a two-party system in this country, that there's actually a choice that we have, that we were all very excited to, oh, my team won. Well, what does that mean? And if the Republican team meant something to the conservative base who actually has values, then we would see our values moved forward. But no, our team is quote unquote winning, but our people are still losing because we're not getting a political party that adheres to its professed values. The Democrat Party, they vote for that. Run my life, please. You know, and so when they vote for a Democrat, that's exactly what we're getting. Oh, we promised you everything. And they've been doing it in the black community for years. Oh, we promised you this for 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 years, and they never deliver, but they keep on voting for them. That's fine. That's what Democrats do. That's what liberals do. That's what socialists and communists do. Conservatives should have higher expectations. When I vote for a Republican, it ought to mean something, but that's the problem. Republican doesn't mean anything anymore. Democrat does. Republican doesn't.
You sort of touched on this already, Michael, but a lot of people, I think, lost in some of the noise and some of these other issues is that the state government grew its budget, its biennial budget, to, I think, $321 billion. It was like a 21% increase from the last biennium. This is a massive increase in state spending, right? At a time when a lot of people say, maybe keep it the same or, heaven forbid, cut it, right? That's like a four-letter word to even suggest that they might spend a little less.
Have an extra T in there to make it forward.
Right? What does that say about the priorities of those that we have supposedly representing us right now?
Well, just for, comparing our reaction as Texas-based conservatives and Republicans to if the federal government, if Joe Biden, the President of the United States, were to go to Congress and say, I want a 21% increase in federal spending, we would yell and scream, we would revolt, we would do all sorts of potentially seditious things over the proposal of a 21% increase in federal spending. I'm about to assert something is true that might not be exactly true. I'm pretty certain there's never been a 21% increase in federal spending, certainly not in this century, certainly not in this century, and since World War II of the last century, have we seen a 21% budget-to-budget increase in federal spending, and yet we do it in Texas, and okay. Again, it kind of goes to your mindset question. The expectation line says, 21% increase in the size of government. Are you telling me that there was like 21% more things for government to be doing in my life? I feel like they already do more than enough. Thank you very much.
Has your life improved 21% since? And by the way, I think the operative word you used there was ask.
Yeah.
Nobody asked.
Nobody asked.
Nobody asked in this government, in the Texas government. They just did it, and they expected. Hey, nobody's paying attention, so who the hell cares? Nobody's going to call us to the carpet, so do it.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, because we're giving them $18 billion back, allegedly. Isn't that number? Is actually closer to 13. Anyway, it's closer to 13, but I mean the number that all the biased press printed was $18 billion. And look at that over here, but don't look at all the other money that we're spending over here. Why are you spending all that money? Right. We don't have to justify that to the people. And I think, again, it's a mindset, and part of it is our fault because we've allowed them to get away with this idea that Reagan called trust me government should be something that the conservative or, frankly, any American says, no. A government of, by, and for the people with the permission of the people. You ask us before you spend our money in such a, I would argue, irresponsible way.
Well, I think the real interesting thing to see, the actual manifestation of that, is if you go to the Capitol, you go to the Capitol grounds, there's a lot of buildings around there. It's kind of where the state agencies and other government offices are. They're doing construction. And if you go in some of those buildings, there's literally empty floors. And this is the manifestation of when government grows, this is where it's going to grow to. I mean, they keep expanding literally physically right there, which I think is just amazing to see. Switching gears a little bit, we looked at some of the priorities and some of the things that actually did pass as far as Republican Party of Texas priorities. A lot of them had to do with protecting children. And I'd say there was a spotlight on these issues, be it ending gender mutilation, taking pornographic material out of libraries, ending these sexual performances that target kids as well. You name it. There was a focus on these issues that we didn't see 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago. What does it say that all of a sudden these issues have been brought to the forefront?
Well, I think broadly speaking, this phenomenon that's washed over this country, arguably last decade, but it really picked up steam in the last 5 years, a concerted cultural attack by what I call cultural Marxism. It's intentional. Our children, the next generation, is the intentional target. You take out, it's communism 101. You take out the next generation, and you set a country on a glide path toward dictatorship, totalitarianism. And the perversion and the expulsion of a Judeo-Christian value inside of government, inside of gov-ed, is exactly the target. You don't have any morals, you don't have any values, you don't stand up and oppose Democrats. If you don't have any values, you don't oppose Democrats. So they've tried to extricate that out. As far as the pornographic materials inside of gov-ed, the push toward the pushback against the LGBTQ, ABCD, EFG cultural Marxism that's being pushed, the critical race theory, which is the teaching of racism. GovEd is still doing that in this state. GovEd, courtesy of the legislature, has been empowered to tell a sitting governor, yes, we recognize that you told us we cannot force children in masks, but guess what? We're going to do it anyway. Oh, yes, we recognize the legislature put a prohibition on the teaching of critical race theory, but guess what? We're going to teach it anyway. Why? Because nobody in the state legislature decided to put a penalty for violating those laws in, because we never punish government. The Republicans never punish government in the state of Texas. There should be real consequences for a government agency that betrays not only the law, but the trust of the people of Texas, and there are none, and so-called Republicans in the legislature make sure there are none.
So I'll put a happy spin on the legislation that came out of the session. A lot of these things are not new. The filth that's been allowed to kind of show up on school library shelves. Right now, as we're having this discussion, Austin ISD is using taxpayer resources to bus children, their parent and faculty and staff to the LGBTQ Pride Parade. Remember, June is Pride Month, but every month has to have its own Pride Parade, right?
It's like half the calendar now.
And so they're now in, they're literally doing that right now in downtown Austin, and there'll be no consequences. They're allowed to do that. There are no consequences to taxpayer resources to go to a political event, busing people to a political event. So the stuff's been going on for a while. You had now for 6 years running, folks trying to stop the mutilation of children to achieve a cosmetic appearance of a different gender. You've had 8 years running of this perverted drag Christmas show, coming through Texas. But this year, the legislature took action, and they took action not because our legislators were suddenly gripped by a sense of morality. If you've met them, you would understand that joke. Instead, it resulted from citizens having had enough. The legislature took action because citizens had had enough, and they knew they had nowhere to hide politically. And it should be a lesson to us that, you mean when we speak up, when we demand action, we actually do get things done. And those you've heard me go on these rants before, I'll try not to today. But I think that's the advance that we saw this session in legislation protecting children from this series of abuses should be a reminder to us that if we as citizens will engage we can win, but we lose when we sit at home and throw a shoe at the TV, or we are just posting on Facebook or whatever. When we take action, we can win. And that's what I think that this session has taught us.
And even some Democrats,
Yeah.
when forced to actually address this issue, some Democrats had to admit, no, I'm not into what this government-sponsored perversion is all about. And it's, by the way, you mentioned what's happening in Austin, up in Fort Worth right now. The Fort Worth Independent School District there is scrambling to remove all of this stuff off the shelves. And it's like, wait a minute, so you knew it was there. Oh, and now they're scrambling to get rid of it.
Yeah.
It's very telling what government will do when we, the people, don't pay attention.
Well, and speaking of schools, one of the issues that seems to repeatedly hit a roadblock, specifically in the Texas House, is school choice, expanding educational freedom for parents and families in Texas. This is a Republican Party of Texas priority, has been. This session, Governor Greg Abbott, I'd say, really embraced it. You saw him tour the state, spend a good amount of his political energy, political capital to push this, and yet repeatedly it was killed in the Texas House. He says they're going to call back probably in October and see if they can work something out. Why is it that in a state like Texas, it's so difficult to get this across the finish line when you see states like Arizona, Florida, some others pass it fairly easily?
I want you to go first on this one.
So there are 31 states with some form of school choice that is, mostly universal, allowing parents to direct the dollars that would have otherwise been sent at the government school in a different venue, whether that's just a different government school or it's a private school or tutoring or all sorts of different options. Kind of the great laboratory of experimentation. But 31 of them have it, so it's not like this is some crazy radical right-wing thing. In fact, most of the school choice programs in the United States. In the United States of Texas, in the United States, started with Democrats. But it is only as people started recognizing, oh, wait, this is a threat to a political power base. 98% of political donations from teachers go to Democrats. 99% of labor union donations go to Democrats. And so if you start defunding the government schools, that now starts eating away, although no government schools ever lost money because of school choice.
I was going to say, wait a minute, defunding?
Oh, yeah, that'd be great.
Why would you defund these schools? I mean, what parent in their right mind would want to take their child out of such wonderfully high-performing schools? Who in their right? Well, there would be no defunding. Because as soon as Texans got the choice, they would all want to stay in. This marvelous government funding, this smut-peddling government funding. Who would defund such a wonderful thing? That's what all the left-wingers in the state are saying.
That's true. Yeah. So, it's so we have this weird thing where, in fact, every state that has school choice, their government schools have been getting more money with school choice. In Texas, the policies that were put forward by the Texas Senate would have put, I believe it was $10,000 towards a child who qualified to get out of the government school system, and $20,000 to the government school. So the school gets even more money for a kid leaving the program, and just absolutely, if they oppose that, because ultimately, I think what I have come to believe is that public education is not about educating kids, because if that were the case, then you wouldn't really care. If you were committed to education, you wouldn't really care what structure they were sitting in to be educated and what venue they're being educated in. You would want them to be educated. It's not about public education, it's about indoctrination. And that, that you really can't be sure that, St. Anthony's, school for boys who can't read or whatever, you really can't be certain that they're not going to be indoctrinated the right way in that school. And I think that's when you see just this very visceral opposition that's now grown in Texas, particularly against school choice, is that they do see it as an existential threat to what they see as their mission, which is not to educate, but to indoctrinate.
Okay.
Oh, boy.
This one really ticks me off. The state of Texas, as you rightly point out, is still among the knuckle-dragging states in our union. We the people are endeavoring to join the civilized states in our union who provide parental school choice and education freedom. We are being stopped by, and let's be honest, 24 Republicans who have all, in my mind, earned primary challengers, each and every one of them. Guys by the name of, I'm going to name names. Charlie Guerin deserves a primary challenger for what he has done and for what these 23 other Republicans have done, trying to deny the people of Texas parental school choice and the accountability that this gov ed system does not have. Remember, we mentioned earlier that these people inside of government, they never want to punish government for when it violates the trust of our people. The smut, the CRT, the LGBTQ, ABCDFG, cultural Marxist agenda, all of it is a betrayal to the taxpayers of this state. And the one thing that they're battling against, they don't want accountability. They don't want to be told what to do. You've seen it from Arizona to the White House. Well, they're not really your children. They're all of our children. To which I say, to heck with that. No, these are my children. And these are my taxpayer dollars. So what everybody needs to understand is that this fight for school choice, for parental school choice and education freedom is, the operative word there is freedom. When you start to imbue into the population an accountability measure that the people in the legislature have shown zero interest in providing accountability or any type of standards for gov ed in this state, that doesn't result in padding to their political campaigns or padding their own personal pockets. You put that power back where it frankly belongs, in the power of in the possession of we the people, then you start getting something we call accountability. Then everybody rises. Gov ed rises. And by the way, it is gov ed. It has not been public education for a long, long time. Then all of a sudden gov ed does better. Then there are more resources for good teachers and good parents and individuals who want to make private education go high. Everybody, the boat rises with that tide. So those who are fighting now against parental school choice and education freedom are wanting to keep us in the dark ages, are wanting to avoid that one crucial thing that we should all want, government accountability, and they don't want it.
It is going to make it very interesting, for 20 years. Like when I remember in 1998, watching state campaigns, and you had Republicans and Democrats actually campaigning on getting school choice in Texas in the 1999 legislative session. When Republicans took control of the Texas legislature in 2002, the Texas House, the 2002 campaign was, in part, we're going to do bring school choice to Texas, and as I've been talking about for more than 20 years now. But it feels like we use a talking point and then it's kind of lost again. You had the interesting effect last cycle when Greg Abbott said, "Oh, I'm endorsing on school choice," and Ted Cruz said, "I'm endorsing on school choice." Greg Abbott endorsed a lot of incumbents. I think his team with kind of the very rose-colored glasses thinking of how personally persuasive all politicians think they all are, that by endorsing these recalcitrants, they would embrace school choice. Ted Cruz, who kind of tends to more like to, stab people with a pointy stick.
God love him.
Yeah, he decided, we need to oppose these guys because they have opposed school choice. I'm going to oppose them. Now, Greg Abbott won in the sense that those candidates won re-election, like a Glenn Rogers in Parker County and that end of the world. He won re-election with Greg Abbott's support and Ted Cruz's opposition, but yet he turned right around and opposed Greg Abbott's school choice. And so it's going to be interesting to see, kind of politically what happens this time around Ted Cruz came out, I think it was on Newsmax actually. He said that he was going to be opposing in the primaries any Republican who voted against school choice.
Oh yeah.
And Greg Abbott has been more and more leaning in that. So it's going to be interesting to see politically. Because the numbers bear out, rural Republicans actually support. The myth has been, the excuse has been, oh, we're not doing school choice because rural Republicans don't like school choice. Yet all the polling, including like 2 or 3 times on the Republican primary ballot, the question has shown no. Actually, they support it at higher numbers than suburban and urban Republicans do.
The majority of Democrats in this state support parental school choice, and Ted Cruz has called this the civil rights issue of our time. And I think he's right.
Yeah.
Let's go down south to the border where, border security and the border invasion that we saw was one of the top issues when people were polled at the beginning of the year. That certainly has stuck through. But for all the talk from some state lawmakers and even Speaker of the House, Dade Phelan, saying that they were going to pass sweeping border security legislation that was going to essentially test sort of the constitutional power of the state. Ultimately, Dade Phelan killed that legislation. We didn't see anything come out. Is this something that should be brought up in a special session?
Yes, because it's going to continue to be a problem. Texas has been doing a lot, but they need to do a lot more. And let's just be honest. The reason why it died was because the Democrats told Dade Phelan, we don't want border security. Yeah. We don't care about Latino communities along the southern border that are being decimated and destroyed. We don't care about those. We want to fulfill Joe Biden's vision of 7 million illegal aliens into this country and 2 million illegal aliens. We have no idea who they are. They're called known gotaways. They could be foreign military. They could be radicalized Islamic fundamentalist terrorists. They could be narco-terrorists. We want them all. Come one, come all. So the Democrats told Dade Phelan, we don't want any checks from the state of Texas, no Texas Border Patrol, no security, and we don't care how many Latino communities on the border are destroyed. And Dade Phelan said, yep, no problem. I'll deliver for you, Democrats.
It has been interesting, again, like on a number of issues. It's been very interesting to watch Governor Abbott's evolution, maturation, frustration. I don't know which is the right word.
Yes, all of the above.
Maybe all of the above on this issue where you go back just 4 years ago, and the governor refused to acknowledge that there was a problem at the border. He studiously avoided the topic, avoided questions about it, didn't want discussions about it. When asked by the Trump administration to make an issue a gubernatorial declaration of emergency at the border, he refused. I think because he thought it would impact economic developments and other things. There are a variety of reasons that his supporters tepidly offered up at various points. To then, we'll do Operation Lone Star, which in the beginning had the appearances of a rather expensive photo op, to now actually doing some really impressive things, some of which are a little cringeworthy. I still think the border buoy barrier system is silly, but yet the outrage it's caused has been fun.
It's worked.
And it appears to be working.
It is working
in the sense that it's forcing these illegal aliens in this 1,000-foot stretch of river to go somewhere else.
To the ports of entry.
Yeah, to the ports of entry.
Nobody's challenging those. I actually talked to the Texas border czar. He said, we monitor those 24/7. Mexico tried to say that these buoys actually killed somebody or a couple of somebodies, and it was a complete lie. But of course, the biased press glommed onto it. But the border czar told me on the podcast, he said, nobody will challenge them because nobody wants to take the chance that they can't get over them.
Right. Yeah, so it's been very fascinating. So the governor has correctly realized, one, there is a political potency to this, and I think that's fine. And he has also recognized there's a real threat here, and so he's begun taking these actions that are at a minimum provoking responses. Again, I think certainly I scoff with the oh my gosh, we're spending another $20,000 to take 25 people to New York City. Oh my gosh, we've got thousands coming across the border every week. We're sending 25 people to New York City at a huge cost. On the other hand, you've got the mayor of New York now, begging and pleading for it to stop. So again, there's a
Did you hear what Biden
there's an
told
effect
him?
happening.
Did you hear what Biden told
No.
him? You're going to love this. Joe Biden said to New York, "You're going to have to suck it up until after the election." and of course, we all in Texas, we laugh.
Yeah.
We laugh because what they're experiencing there is a day in Eagle Pass.
Right.
But it's breaking these sanctuary cities. Massachusetts just declared a state of emergency.
Right.
Because of what Texas and other states were shipping our illegal aliens up to them. They can't handle it.
Well, and again, you look at the response. I believe it was in Massachusetts where you had the, Secretary of doing stupid liberal things or whatever for their state.
That's an actual office.
That's an actual office, yeah. She's there saying, "Oh, we need people to volunteer to, bring the MS-13 cartel members into their homes." This kind of stuff. Good luck.
Chicago. They have city council meetings where the black community in Chicago, they're saying these people, the illegal aliens, they don't respect us. They're robbing us. They're harassing us, and then you expect us to dedicate our taxpayer dollars to building shelters for these people because the Democrats, of course, are pro-foreign national at the expense, and the black community is going,
what about us?
What about us?
But meanwhile, you've got like Cleveland, Texas, where this big housing development's gone in that is apparently, their marketing is catered towards people in Central and South America who aspire to be illegal aliens. So they market this place to, hey, if you're going to hike, 2,000 miles, come buy a trailer in our, trailer park, wherever. But in 3 years, they have doubled the size of Cleveland ISD. Doubled the size. In 3 years, and the cost that the burden of that is just there on, it's on all of us, obviously, as taxpayers in Texas, but especially on the folks in that community. And again, and we're all just supposed to smile and take it because we're Texans. And yet when you look at the recent comments from the New York City mayor, talking about, oh my gosh, we have 2,000 illegal aliens in New York. We can't handle anymore. You're like,
really?
Come on. That many just walked past the cameras in Eagle Pass,
Oh, yeah, and one of the advisors for Eric Adams said, we've been denied the money because Joe Biden's people told us that if we gave money, if we diverted taxpayer money to solve a crisis that we Democrats created, we'd be admitting there was a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's why you've got to suck it up until after we con enough people to vote for Democrats in the next election. That's why you people in New York have got to suck it up. And it's like the people in New York are going, wait a minute, well, why are we voting Democrat again?
Maybe it's it look like there's a problem because there is an actual problem,
there
right?
Is.
All right, we're going to go over 2 or 3 more questions here, but I do want to remind people if you have any questions, we're going to take questions in just a few minutes. As we're talking right now, I think it's somewhere north of 140 degrees outside. A lot of concern about...
We call that fall, Brandon.
Yeah, exactly, no matter what part of the state you're in. A lot of talk about whether or not the legislature has done enough to make sure that the electric grid is hardened, and there's certainly a lot of attention, people getting interested in that right now when their ACs are running all day long. Has the legislature done enough?
Did you guys see Grid Down, Power Up? Have you seen the...
Yeah.
If you haven't seen Grid Down, Power Up, watch it. The answer is no. This legislature has not done enough. We have not expanded any dispatchable power in the state of Texas. We have not... There's a good buddy of mine, I was talking before we started the program here, I was talking about a good buddy of mine on the podcast, Sean Chastain, who almost regularly says, you know what, as a Texan, I can't fathom why we in the state of Texas, awash, abundant in natural resources, including natural gas, clean burning natural gas, why we don't have that as the basis for our cooking, our power generation, and we put Texans back to work.
A gas stove?
I know.
You expect people, you're a monster.
I know. Remember, Joe Biden is trying to take the gas stoves away from us. And funny little story about that too. He wants to also go after our water heaters. our gas water heaters. He wants to replace with something called a heat pump. I had one of my air conditioning units go down. The technician shows up. He says, yeah, you got a 1990s unit. You know, you got a heat pump on that. I said, a heat pump? I go, can we just disable it? He goes, well, it's an older system. The reason why it's there is because back in the 1990s when Texas was run by Democrats, back in the 1990s, the power company said, you know, we got sick and tired of every winter coming around and the electricity rates would drop and all of our money would dry up because Texans weren't paying us all this money. So they paid all these contractors a whole bunch of money to install these electric heat pumps so that the money wouldn't drop out every single winter. and I said, seriously? He goes, yeah. And he goes, that's why you have a heat pump. I go, well, disable the damn thing. And he said, but that's what Joe Biden wants to do to all of us now. He wants to put heat pumps in water heaters and not have any natural gas. Why? Because it's clean burning, it's abundant, it's cheap. And God forbid we have something that's clean burning, abundant, and cheap for our people. We might actually not be spending as much money. And it just shows you where the woke corporate interests have sold us out, dating back all the way to the 90s. What's the common denominator? Democrats.
We have an actual, I don't usually sing the praises of people in public office because most of them are not praiseworthy. But we do in the Texas Legislature have a guy who is an actual, honest to goodness, infrastructure expert named Bob Hall, a state senator from East Texas who spent, great guy. That's literally what he did in the military, was make sure that that key infrastructure was protected from natural and man-made EMPs and other things. And so, it's a very short step from that into our electric grid and those things. And Senator Hall has been ringing this bell now for a number of years about the lack of redundancy within our electric grid, within our power systems and other critical infrastructure. And everyone in the legislature kind of smiles, nods, oh, that's cute. The expert says that we're not doing enough, but oh, well, it'll probably be okay. And generally, it's, I think, a lot of it is Bill Peacock, who does some writing for us and others on these issues, point to us because, ultimately, there's really good money to be made from having it almost good enough so that when there's a crisis, you can really, increase the spending. And no one has the incentive. No one in public office has the incentive to make these long-term commitment to natural gas, to these things that work, that are cheap and easy, dispatchable power. And then the only way that's going to happen is if enough of us say, we need this addressed. But unfortunately, it's probably not going to happen until we have more Februaries like we had in 2021, where you go, 5 days without power. It's bad when that happens in the winter, but the real concern is going to be when it happens in the summer. When power goes out in the winter, you'll have the occasional very sad, tragic instance of someone dying. Doesn't happen very often in Texas. If it happens in the summer,
you're looking at
a major death event at that point.
We have power insecurity in the state, courtesy of the Texas Legislature, in particular the House. That is going to be a threat to human life. As we saw in Snowmageddon, 250 Texans paid with their lives because too many politicians, my next door neighbor, he makes all this Obama money from, putting up these and I'm not poo-pooing windmills and I'm not poo-pooing solar technology. I love advanced technology, but I'm not willing to bank the lives of my fellow Texans on that. And nobody should. And that legislature is irresponsible for doing that. So we have power insecurity in this state. It threatens life. It threatens our business. What business is going to want to come to Texas if we can't keep the lights on? Ask people who are relocating from California right now for that very same reason. They're leaving California because they can't keep the lights on. It's a threat to our prosperity, and it's a threat to our very lives. And Texans ought not accept it anymore.
We can't talk about this last legislative session without talking about what ended up sort of being the grand finale, I guess, if you want to call it that, which was over Memorial Day weekend, this rushed sort of less than 48 hours notice proceeding. The Texas House voted to impeach Attorney General Ken Paxton. You had 61 Democrats and 60 Republicans joined together to do it. Real quick, just I'd love to get both of y'all's short thoughts on why exactly that happened and what you think is going to happen next in this process.
So I think there were a number of reasons why that happened, none of which were stated on the floor of the Texas House. You have to understand that whatever you may or may not think about Ken Paxton personally, and generally I'm of the opinion we need to stop thinking personally about any of these people. They are the checkout clerk at a fast food restaurant you'll never visit again. I mean, we should treat them professionally and courteously. They're human beings, but at the end of the day, these are checkout clerks at a fast food restaurant on a family vacation. So whatever you might think about him as an individual, he has in that office done some pretty upsetting things to a certain class of people, taking on big tech very successfully when it was not something you were supposed to do, taking on big pharma when it was something you were not supposed to be doing, taking on the Biden administration when the Republican business community in Texas didn't want that going on. Made some folks unhappy there, and I think that was a big drive to this. Matt Rinaldi, we have a documentary coming out later this week called The Texas Heist, and Matt Rinaldi in that talks about how you don't find a single Texas Republican talking about the impeachment of Ken Paxton prior to 48 hours before the impeachment vote. Not a single Republican ever talked about impeaching Ken Paxton. Not a one. There's not a single one. 0, 0, 0. On the other hand, the Democrats in Texas all started beating the drums about impeaching Ken Paxton on January 7th, 2021, because they didn't like the fact that he had filed a lawsuit regarding the way one of the other 59 states, however many there are, had done their counting, and they said, "Oh, see, he's insurrectionist, so we need to impeach him." And so the Democrats, since January 7th, 2021, have been calling for the impeachment of Ken Paxton. Not a single Republican had talked about impeaching Ken Paxton until 48 hours before that vote. And again, whatever you think of what Ken Paxton may or may not have done and what its value is, all those kind of things, we should, Bill Zedler, a former member of the Texas House, pointed out to me, process matters. John Smithy, a state rep from West Texas, made this comment on the floor of the House also that, in 1975, there was an impeachment of ultimately a district judge, I think, or something like that. They spent 3 weeks on the floor debating the impeachment. They had the entire House was in session as a committee of the whole, where they brought in witnesses who were sworn, who were members of the House, asked questions of the witnesses leading up to their impeachment vote. In the Texas House, you had a dozen House members knew an investigation. The majority of the House was kept in the dark about the investigation. They couldn't ask, no witnesses were placed under oath, no witnesses were asked questions by the House. The process should matter. And when we say that we're a nation that believes in the rule of law, process actually matters. And everything about this impeachment it feels more like appeasing Democrats than it does achieving a public policy end.
On the lawsuit in question, I've followed it religiously. There were 4 states that the state of Texas had said violated the U.S. Constitution in the election of 2020. I have been asking the question since the election of 2020, are states allowed to violate the Constitution and their own election laws? Are they allowed to? Nobody seems to want to answer that question for me. And and I think it still needs to be answered, what happened. Actually, Michigan, one judge did bang the gavel and said that Jocelyn Benson did violate her state's election laws. She's still the Secretary of State, and nobody's paid a price for that, but a judge has ruled. So Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, and Pennsylvania would like to know about those. But since Ken Paxton asked that question, you're right, the left wing has been gunning for them. The procedure that the Texas House went through was worthy of Barack Hussein Obama. And I say Barack Hussein Obama for a very specific reason. He had his fingerprints all over those proceedings, from the lawyers behind the scenes that were advising this so-called Republican group to the parliamentarian that now gives Speaker Dade Phelan his advice, a dedicated Obama lawyer. So I would just say this about the impeachment proceedings. It has all the imprimatur and all the legitimacy in my mind of the Garland Justice Department, which is to say there is none. Which is to say, when there's no transparency, it usually means you have something to hide. And the Republicans who signed onto this have a hell of a lot to hide. And I'd like to know what they're hiding.
Yeah, I think, absolutely. A lot of people will. And we're going to be, of course, following the impeachment trial when it starts on September 5th. So day after Labor Day, the Senate will get started on that. Right now, happy to open it up if anybody has any questions for any of us. We've got, I think, a microphone to bring over to you
right there. Yeah.
Awesome.
Just line up right down the center aisle. Just
we can do it that way.
There you go.
Sure. Hey guys, thanks. Hey, can you comment on any legislation that was an attempt to rein in Soros-backed DAs, especially in Travis County, in terms of them being recalled or moving venue of cases?
Yeah, I mean, this has been a huge issue that we've seen in, not just Travis County, but in Harris County, Dallas County, basically any of your big counties. You've got these DAs that now pick and choose which laws they're going to enforce, right? And so, for example, after the Supreme Court last year overruled Roe v. Wade, you had some DA saying, well, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to prosecute an abortionist if they commit a crime, basically, in our county. And up till now, the legislature has, they've kind of had their hands tied on this. To answer your question, there were a couple efforts that did move through the process that we will see ultimately signed into law. Essentially, that create a bit of a review process for some of these DAs. But I think that people want to see a lot more done, right? I think that it's a frustrating thing when a DA who gets elected in many of these cases, right? These hard left Democrats who get elected on the position that I'm going to be the district attorney because I'm not going to prosecute crimes. I think that that's an amazing perversion of the process.
Personally, every time I'm up in Dallas, I get very upset with myself when I'm leaving Dallas because in Dallas you can steal things worth up to $750 and not be prosecuted. Yep. And I keep thinking, why have I not done my Christmas shopping? Why have I not? And I get very frustrated with myself that I keep forgetting that I can steal $749 worth of things in Dallas and not bear a price of that. So eventually, maybe I've got a trip up to Dallas next week. Maybe I'll do some advanced Christmas shopping then.
Yeah.
But I think that when we talk about the Soros stuff, bad guy wanting to do bad things, but let's also remember though that too many of us could not tell you the name of our district attorney, and we can be very frustrated with what George Soros and his ilk are trying to do. But let's give the devil his due and recognize that he's doing something we aren't, which is participating in these local elections, in these down ballot elections, where there's a whole lot of very real, practical power, and I think it's an indictment on Republicans, brand name Republicans, party officials, and others who have not put the money and the time and the energy behind those kind of races, and us as voters for not asking enough questions, for not engaging this. We all have to make sure that we are sounding off about our latest hot take about what some member of Congress from some other part of the country did, but yet, we can't be bothered to, block walk for the district attorney candidate. We can't be bothered to have the sign of a school board candidate in our front yard. Those are the positions that really matter. The U.S. congressman from Maine doesn't matter to us that much, but your district attorney, as we're learning, matters a lot.
Yeah, and a cautionary tale, 50% of the businesses in San Francisco since 2019 have left.
Wow.
Because they have this same mentality as Let 'em Go Crusoe in Dallas, which is out in California because, it's a lot more expensive in California to live. It's $950 you can steal without any ramifications.
That almost makes a flight worthwhile.
Exactly. Yeah. The entire dang state, though, is like that.
Yeah.
And San Francisco has become the human feces capital of the world, the hypodermic capital of the world, and yes, the criminal's paradise of the world. And Austin, Travis County, is fast tracking to becoming just like that. So if you want Texas and your Texas capital look like San Francisco, as the former president, Trump, articulated, an S-hole city, then by all means, continue to allow left-wing district attorneys to get elected and ignore the law. If you want to change it, get involved.
Yes. Next question.
So forgive me if I'm really naive, okay? Let me start this whole thing off by that. I'm really passionate about this stuff. Ask my neighbors, okay? And we started off this whole thing about, we ought to be upset. We're letting them get away with this. We should do something about it. What? I need a checklist, okay? I'm not a big thinker. I need somebody to tell me, here's what you do. And I don't know where that is.
Okay, I'll go first.
Okay.
I'll go first. What I always tell conservatives who ask me that question, why do you think the left-wingers don't have that, or they're not bothered by that obstacle? Seems to me the left knows exactly what to do when they want to steal your rights. If you really want a checklist, look what the left wing is doing to steal your rights, and you do that to protect them. Look at what the other side is doing. They're getting together, they're organizing, they're behind their candidates, and they actually hold their candidates to account. And stop me if you have heard this one before. How many of you have heard, well, you know what? I got a job to go to. I'm out there busy making and it's true. We conservatives and Republicans are going to work, and we're the ones that are making the world go round, if you will. But we've got to take time to recognize what the other side is doing. You've got to organize. You've got to put together coalitions of people. You've got to join conservative groups in your area and get involved in that way, and then turn that into action. The block walking was mentioned, but again, if you want a short list of what to do, look at what the other side is doing to attack you, and do that to defend yourself.
Yeah, I would point to, just very proud depending on where you live, the True Texas Project is a fantastic organization to get involved with. They do very kind of local groups and stuff, and that gives you an opportunity to plug in. None of us can do everything, and I think that's the one of the things the conservative movement. A lot of us act like the Lone Ranger, but a version of the Lone Ranger who shot Tonto 3 miles back and refuses to interact with U.S. cavalry. The Lone Ranger was never actually the Lone Ranger. But so. The left does a very good job of acting communally. I mean, they're communists; they do good at acting communally.
Exactly.
But as Christians, as people of faith, we should also be willing to act in community and recognizing that finding your neighbors, your friends of, hey, I'm going to watch our school board member. Don't have to watch the whole school board. Just watch your district school board member if you're in a geographically segmented school board. My city council member, our mayor. That's where I would suggest that if you want to start fixing things, don't start with your member of Congress, don't start with the legislature, start with your school board, start with your city council, and a lot of it is looking ahead to what governance looks like a decade and a half from now. You look at members of the Texas legislature, you look at members of the U.S. House of Representatives, most of them held an office previous to that one.
Yep, step up.
Particularly when they're Democrats, particularly the Democrats. We all, you brought up your best friend Obama a moment ago, that we all mock and giggle at, he was just a community organizer. We need more of those on our side, because what the Democrats did, the Democrat machine did very well in Chicago. They found people who were promising, who were committed, who were willing to go out and fight, and they would put them into city council, or I think they call them aldermen. I don't know.
Yeah,
some stupid thing. They'd put them into school boards, and if they didn't have one of those positions, they'd put them as community organizers, kind of things like precinct chairs, maybe, or something. And they would see who did the work, and they would promote them up, and they would start very locally and move them up. And as they saw they could be trusted doing this thing, then move them up to the next level and the next level. He went from being a community organizer to the President of the United States in a decade and a half, okay? But it's because he proved, and whether you may not like him, he proved he was very effective, very committed, right? And so I think that if we are willing, if we want to start affecting the White House, we need to start affecting city councils. We need to start affecting school boards. I went to my own school board meeting this week. I don't know why. Sometimes you do stupid things. They made a fantastic case for abolishing public education. Government education, excuse me. I apologize.
No such thing anymore.
But all I could think was, what the blazes have I been doing? We've only lived in the school district now for a couple of years. I was horrified. There's one member of the school board who I might agree with politically, maybe if I squinted funny at this person, the rest of them didn't, but all of them horrified me. And I thought, this is insane. And I literally had a conversation with my next door neighbor about it. I went to school meeting. They were crazy. And again, that's where I think that's where we start changing, is we have to thrust ourselves into those very local government. And that will start impacting things up the line.
Also, remember I mentioned mindset earlier? Think Bud Light. Mm-hmm. How many even know the name Bud Light? How many even know the name Target? Mm-hmm. How many even know the name Woke Disney? If our people had as much passion about changing their own political fortunes that we do about sending a message to these woke companies, we could change Texas, we could change the world. Yeah. If we just had that mindset. Just think about it. It's just that simple. Bud Light, you going to have it? Hell no, I'm not going to have a Bud Light. Are you going to get out of your mind? I'm not going to support that. Then why would you sit back and support rogue DAs? Why would you not do everything in your power to make sure there was another brand of beer DA to drink?
Excellent. We've got time for a couple more questions. Yes.
Yes, good morning, gentlemen. We really appreciate you coming and sharing your wisdom with us. My name is Doug. I retired from U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Worked with them for 33 and a half years, both in uniform and plain clothes.
You don't twitch or anything. That's amazing. You're not twitching or anything. That's amazing.
I did. I served at the largest land border, the busiest land border in the world, San Ysidro, right across from Tijuana.
Yeah.
Worked in seaports, airports. I worked expecting a high level of integrity, morality, dedication. And most of the people I worked with had that. But as you went up the ranks in supervision, it began to get corrupted. I saw that on a small scale. I took it upon myself probably about 20 years ago to start studying politics and what motivates people. And it's a very dark avenue. Most of us in the conservative movement, I feel, are very moral, have a high level of integrity, and our opposition does not. And it's become a system of light versus darkness. And I think most of us have a true understanding of what's really happening behind the scenes on a spiritual level, and it translates into the way people act and behave. I think most of us in the conservative movement are very frustrated. 2020 election, we learned how easy it was for our opposition to take control of the polling, the counting of votes. They took it right from Joseph Stalin. It's not who votes, it's who counts the votes. How can we put a stop to this machine that has risen up, empowered itself, suppresses the truth, suppresses facts and figures? After the 2020 election, I don't know if you recall, there were about 1,200 people that came forward as eyewitnesses of voter fraud and irregularity. Some of them spoke in various states as to what they saw, and yet nothing ever became of it. All we keep hearing in the press was these are false stories. These are misproven ideas. These are lies.
So one, Doug, thank you for your work at the Border Patrol. And you know, there are two ways that we can react. We always like to talk internally that we always have two choices. You can either be controlled by someone else, you can control yourself, right? We get to choose our response, can't choose your circumstances. And I think there are two responses that come. One, and I fear the more common one when we see these things, is to check out. Because that is the path of least resistance. Well, they're just going to steal the election, so why should I bother to go vote? I was literally told that earlier this week at an event I was at. Why should I even bother to vote? That is the path of, that is the easiest thing to do. That's water running downstream, right? That's the easy thing to do. The other response is we're going to overwhelm the darkness with light. And I think that, I cannot control the outcome. I firmly believe that I am not called to be successful. I'm called to be faithful. And that I think that too many of us have decided that that we either need to be successful or not participate, so we can't be called a failure. If I don't go vote, then no one can say that my candidate lost, and now I can be successful. I'm not called to be successful. I'm called to be faithful, and I think that's where we have to be willing then to be faithful to our calling as citizens, and participate even if we're going to lose. John Quincy Adams said it's even if I vote alone, I haven't lost because I've been true to myself. I just completely screwed up this quote, but it's something like that. He said it much better than I did because of the 1800s, so he said it better than I just said it. So one, we have to be personally faithful. Two, we do have to be willing to hold up our candle in the dark place and hope that encourages others to make the same choice, because we can overwhelm the darkness with light. But we just got to be willing to stand there with the hot wax dripping down our fingers for a minute until there are more. The concerns about voter fraud and all that, I think, are the only way voter fraud works is if we stay home. I'm absolutely convinced that the voter fraud works with low turnout, with on the edges, hitting the percentages. And the more like-minded people we have turn out, the more we overwhelm that system with people who can say, I was there, I saw it. I got to give huge credit to Alexandra Melier. Brandon interviewed her on the headline yesterday, and then it's written about her fight in Harris County. Most of us would have told her, after losing the county judge race a year ago, just give it up, Alexandria. Go find something else to do. Run for the next office. Do whatever. And instead, she's fighting that election. She's sticking with it.
Record number.
Yeah, she's now found 32,000 illegitimate votes. And that's more than the percentage that the Democrat won by. So one, we have to be so we have to be diligent. One, we have to be faithful. Two, we have to bring others. Three, we have to be diligent in just sticking with it. And you look at that election, look at the look at the undercount problems in down ballot races where just not enough people chose to participate. So again, that when you have people willing to do illegal things with 32,000 votes, they're able to do that when 64,000 of the people you go to church with, who live next door to you, who are friends from high school, said, I voted for the congressman, so I'm done. Well, no, you need to keep on going down the ballot and keep voting. We need to do a better job as citizens in that regard.
Right, we need to do a better job of vetting candidates.
Yeah.
I wanted to recognize the spiritual component of what you were talking about. And I think that we have always been caught between the universal struggle between good and evil. And I was telling Michael or somebody else in the audience earlier, Christians believe we are enjoined by Christ Jesus to oppose evil wherever we find it, whether it's a losing battle or not. That's what a lot of people ask me, Chris, why do you do what you do? Why do you get up there and say that? I mean, all you do is get attacked. It's like, 'cause I can't do anything else. I don't know how to do anything else other than tell the truth as I see it. Search for the truth, wherever it leads me. So in our day-to-day struggles, recognize, and I'm a sinner like everybody else, so declaring myself on the side of the angels is a little too presumptuous on my part. But I can say that I'm trying to get there. And maybe we ask ourselves in a spiritual manner, what am I doing to get there? And I believe there is no greater duty to God or to try to get there than to oppose a leftist, because they stand against everything that God stands for. That's what allows them to get into government and do what they do. It's what Reagan called a prompting of the conscience. And when you look at the fall of great societies, from time immemorial, you'll see that the precursor to their fall is turning away from their God or their gods. And we're doing that right now. And you know who knows that better than all of us? Our opponents. That's exactly what the game is. So you fight them on any level you can. Because it could be that one full measure, that one small measure that can lead to the overall struggle.
Absolutely. We've got just a few minutes, and we've got two people who have questions, so I want to see if we can get through these real quick here. Yes?
Thank you guys for choosing faith. It shows in your work. Thank you very much. I have two statements and a question. One statement is, vote early. No. Vote on Election Day. Protect your vote. Our school board meeting was just as insane as yours, I assure you, right here in this county, in this city where this building is. You should watch it. All right, so our border, watch the Canadian border. No one has eyes on the Canadian border. Look at the stats of what's coming across up there. Because we're focused down here, guess what? Nobody's watching up there. My question is this. We heard on the House floor on impeachment day that many of them talked about, the House members talked about section 665.081. The no removal for acts committed before election to office. And I believe you've written about that. I have a question about it because I have a constitutional debate with some friends. It says that the executive department of the state shall consist of a governor, a chief executive officer of the state, a lieutenant governor, a secretary of state, a comptroller of public accounts, and commissioner of general land office, and the attorney general, period. Nobody else, not a land commissioner, a ag commissioner or any other position. And that law talks about a state officer versus an executive branch officer. Does it apply to the AG?
Well, I think his, none of us are attorneys, right?
Yeah.
But I think his attorneys have argued that. I mean, they've argued that 19, I mean, there were 20 of these charges, by the way, that they did in this impeachment trial. 20 of these charges, 19 of them happened before the last election. Some of them happened 2014 when he was elected the first time.
Right.
And so, this is certainly the argument they're going to make. The decision on that's going to ultimately be made when they meet on the 5th, when the Senate starts their trial. They're going to be voting on these motions, whether or not they're going to dismiss these charges before there's even the trial, and then we'll get a little bit of clarity. There's a lot of kind of in general, kind of speaking more broadly, when we're talking about the impeachment process, so many of these questions have sort of gray answers because we've only done this like a couple times. Like nobody knows,
Twice.
right?
Literally twice.
In some cases, people are going back to, when Pa Ferguson, 100 years plus ago, and they're looking in these records, right? I mean, totally different time. And so talking to some of the people who've been involved in this process, they're literally they're just kind of building this process as they go, because it's fortunately not something that we've had to use so often in Texas. Last question, yes.
Before you go on for that, just real quick, do you think the Senate could dismiss on procedural grounds that I think everybody concedes what the House did was so shoddy and so below board and not transparent? Is there, from what you guys have interviewed legal folks, is there an avenue where the Senate could just say, you guys really messed this up, there's nothing legal about this, try again?
Certainly it is in the realm of possibility. All of the mixed metaphors around impeachment, it's like everything, metaphors are great, but they all break down usually pretty quickly, right? Mm-hmm. And the House has tried to retcon their impeachment as, well, we're just a grand jury. We're just an advisory committee to a grand jury that will then, they're really trying to back off of their own role in impeachment. Mm-hmm. And the Senate, we're a jury, and so we're going to treat it. So now, these are all political actions. They're all taking political actions. And so because impeachment is ultimately a political action, you can bet that the senators are going to be looking at this from the perspective of, how bad is what I do going to hurt me in the next election, whichever way they go, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's and most politicians, most of them do approach it from how much pain am I willing to tolerate for the activity, for the action I'm going to take, and then they will take the one that has the least amount of pain to it. And I think that to the extent that that they see an avenue to reduce pain and get an unpleasant thing off of their plate, they're going to do that. So a lot of the motion, and I think which is why, and it's not to be critical of the Paxton lawyers necessarily, or maybe it is, I don't know. When you look at the motions that they have made, it feels like they have made motions in a way that gives a majority of the Senate the opportunity to say, we can get rid of this pain of impeachment without having to ask any more pesky questions. And I think that's where the Paxton lawyers have recognized that ideal of limits the amount of pain for a politician, and that's the path he's going to take. And I think that's why you see the motions being made that the Paxton team is making to the Senate is one that gives the Senate the opportunity to reduce their own pain.
And I love the idea of using politics in this, in that the arguably more conservative senators could send a message to the left-wing Republicans. Send a message. You guys really, this was a complete travesty. Those conservatives could really put those liberal Republicans on the defensive come the next election by saying, you guys totally screwed this up, your incompetence. Mm-hmm. Really screwed this up for your political attacks on an actual conservative AG. That could really play out beautifully in a campaign.
And remember, every state senator has a couple of state representatives in their district who might be, so they all have to kind of be thinking about those relationships and who might be gunning for them in the next election. And while half the Senate does not have an election in 2024, all of the House does.
Well, to the
and so again, all these political questions are going to be going through their minds.
To the senators, I would say you could really get rid of a lot of these pesky left-wing Republicans that are thorns in your rear end, and also all of ours, by thinking strategically and politically about this, because there's nothing about this that's legitimate or legal.
Yeah. All right, last question, yes.
All right. Hi, I'm new to Texas, and I wanted to get some insights on the incentives of these people in the House for voting the way that they do. For example, why would 60 Republicans vote to impeach the current Attorney General, who appears to be very popular? Or why would select the current Speaker of the House to be Speaker? Or why would they vote for raising teacher salaries where they know that teachers would never vote for them? Or and I mean, I'm a bit puzzled, and I don't understand what is making them are there lobbying interests that they're doing it? Are they moderate districts? And I don't understand the electorate of Texas that well. I mean, I know generally it is right, but so if you could give some insights on all of that.
So I think the thing that is upsetting and confusing to most people, and people say it all the time, I don't understand why it is that we can send people who seem good, right? We send, you ever done that before? Elected someone you thought was good, and then a couple years later, they got spoiled. In Texas, we see this happen all the time, right? And it's confusing because you think, okay, well, what happened, right? And the thing people kind of first think is, okay, maybe they were bought off or something. Was there some big deal? Okay. And maybe that's because in our mind, we can kind of rationalize that. I don't agree with that, but I can understand how somebody could get some big payout and maybe kind of lose their principles. But in most cases, in 99% of these cases, that's not even really what it is. I think what would be frustrating to people is it's just literally so much smaller than that. It's being a part of the club. Yeah. It is being invited to the lobbyist dinner, right? Mm-hmm. It is being invited to the weekend trip to Fredericksburg with the other guys, not being left out, right? And it's so many of these small things. And I think that when people are susceptible to this, you think, well, how is it that somebody could go 180 on their principles just because they're invited to a dinner? In many cases, it speaks to the character of some of the people that are down there because they maybe weren't that tied to the principles to begin with. That's my observation from watching it. What do you think?
I'm reminded a few years ago, one of the guys who was one of the big rock star, kind of conservative fighters and that kind of stuff, started seeing his voting record drop, and had a conversation with him about it. And his response was, well, my wife got involved with the Legislative Spouses Club or whatever it's called, and she just didn't like that they weren't inviting her to things. But when I started going along with the team, she started being invited to things more, and so she really encouraged me to, be more strategic with my voting, so that and I'm thinking. Yeah, I was mad at myself for saying to him, look, I want to have an off-the-record conversation with you about what's happening. I was so mad at myself. To this day, I've literally never said the phrase, this is an off-the-record conversation because of that, because I would love to, and it was very educational for me, though, of recognizing, Brandon, to your point, that being a part of the club is very important. And, I've made this point a couple of times that if you are a member of the Texas House of Representatives, you can be at any airport on the planet. And because of the size of Texas, there is still the mathematical possibility that a constituent is sitting 4 bar stools down from you, right? When you are on the floor of the Texas House of Representatives, there is a 0.0% chance that your constituent is sitting anywhere near you. Because on the floor of the Texas House, definitionally, none of these people are your constituents. And yet, the Texas House, members of the Texas House, tend to be more concerned with what the state representative from another part of the state thinks about them than they are concerned with what their voters think of them. And our system was designed to attract people pleasers. It is in the DNA of our system of government.
Politicians.
For people to, for a servant, the best waiter you've ever had is the one who knows how to hover just far enough away from the table so he's not intruding in your conversation, and to fill your water glass at the most appropriate time, and to take away the salad plate when it's not going to bother you. That's a people pleaser. That's a good quality. That's a necessary quality, right? And in our government, our structure of government, we elect servants. We elect people pleasers. The problem is that we elect people pleasers, and then we walk away from them, but other people don't. And if someone who's a people pleaser, which is a good thing, it sounds like I'm being critical. It's not. It's a good thing to want to serve, to please the people around you. To the extent that we walk away from them, a people pleaser is going to find people to please. And so as a result, when they're on the floor of the Texas House, and they get in that club, when we are not engaging with them, they will find someone else to please, and it's not going to be you, and it's not going to be your neighbors, and it's not going to be your best interests. We have to be much more engaged. It's on us to be engaged.
When did Texas flip from Democrat to Republican officially?
The Texas House finally flipped in 2002. The Texas Senate had flipped in the early 90s. We started winning the governorships in the really the 1970s, back and forth. Right. But we were completely Republican beginning on January the 10th, 2003, with the Texas House Republican, Texas Senate Republican, every statewide official Republican, every statewide judicial Republican.
So now, the state, we the people, this might answer some of your questions. We the people got a lot more conservative. Either, people came here, were more conservative, wanted to partake in the Texas miracle. There's a lot of positives about our state. So conservatives naturally gravitated here because you could have a comfortable living, you could live in a nice area, and the cost of living was low. So the demographics of we the people changed, but the politicians didn't. When everything flipped over to Republican, there were still some Democrats who found themselves residing in Republican districts. And they were Democrats, but they wanted to be elected. They wanted to go do their job. And so there's also, I'm not sure to a degree, this far along in 2023, how much this is still a factor, but I know it is a factor that there are some people who call themselves Republicans out of necessity for electoral success. Mm-hmm. Not that they have any values that go along with, and back to where one of the first comments I said here today, Republican has to mean something again. And it's up to we the people to make it mean something. Democrat, everybody knows what a Democrat is. Socialist, Marxist, big government, no rights, government runs your life. Everybody knows what a Democrat is. But when you've got John Cornyn and you've got Ted Cruz who can call themselves Republicans, Republican doesn't mean a damn thing at this point. And it's got to mean something again. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of an answer to your question, is how do these things happen? How do Democrat priorities get passed? Is that there aren't enough Republicans who actually believe in conservatism and delivering for their base. They actually believe in delivering for the Democrats. And that's a problem. And those are the people who have to go, frankly.
I think that's a great place to end things. Thank you again, Chris and Michael, for the conversation. Thank you all for coming. We've got lunch right afterwards here outside in the lobby. We'll be happy to stick around and talk with y'all. And thank you, everybody watching at home. You can check out all of our coverage of what's happening in the Texas Legislature, cities in Texas, and beyond at TexasScorecard.com. Thank you so much.